Not every conflict begins with a major mistake. Sometimes it starts with something so small that everyone thinks it's not worth bothering about. An old way of addressing someone, a fleeting reaction, a boundary drawn and then ignored. But it is these seemingly harmless things that smolder, accumulate, and become the catalyst for the deepest danger. Donnie wasn't the type to be easily swayed by superficial things. At least, that's what she always wanted people to believe. A woman who had experienced life, who had been through a long marriage with Bill, she knew his habits so well that she didn't need to guess. But it was precisely that familiarity that prevented her from completely escaping. When Bill unconsciously uttered baby, right in front of others, it wasn't just an old word, it was a piece of the past that had never been fully closed. The noteworthy thing is that Donnie didn't react immediately. There was no obvious discomfort, no warning glance. She remained silent, as if it were nothing significant, but that silence was a choice. And that choice spoke volumes more than any impulsive reaction. Because if she truly didn't care, she wouldn't have brought it up with Andre. Donnie's proactive confrontation with Andre wasn't simply an exchange of information. It was an act of verification. She not only wanted to know what Andre had said to Bill, but also wanted to confirm her position in the current relationship. When Andre set boundaries with Bill, it was theoretically to protect Donnie. But the question was, did Donnie really need that protection? Or did she feel violated when someone else arbitrarily defined what was appropriate for her? Andre believed he was doing the right thing. Calling Bill outdated wasn't just an emotional reaction. It was a way of asserting his position. He refused to accept that a man from the past could step into the present and act as if he hadn't been replaced. But that very assertiveness put him in a dangerous position where the line between protection and control blurred. Donnie realized this, and that's why she couldn't ignore it. If Andre could arbitrarily set limits on Bill today, he could do the same to her tomorrow. Donnie's discomfort didn't stem from Andre talking to Bill, but from his actions as if he had the right to decide everything concerning her. It was a subtle form of intrusion, and Donnie wasn't one to easily accept that. Meanwhile, Bill was in a completely different position. He didn't need to react so strongly to assert his power. His easy disregard for the rules Andre tried to set wasn't because he didn't understand them, but because he didn't value them. To Bill, Andre had never been an equal. Calling him little brat wasn't just an insult, but a way of belittling him, a reminder that he still stood on a higher level in their invisible power structure. It was this disregard that was most dangerous, because it didn't create direct conflict, but silently undermined any attempts at establishing balance. Andre could try to draw a line, but if the other person didn't acknowledge it, that line existed only in name. And Donnie, caught between these two men, was forced to confront a question she couldn't avoid. Which side was she truly on, or was she merely trying to maintain a false sense of control? Naomi and Haley witnessed it all, and their silence didn't mean indifference. As small details begin to emerge, their perception of Donnie gradually changes. A woman claims she's not jealous, yet can't overlook an old form of address. A man says he only wants to protect, yet acts as if he possesses. And another man, seemingly a relic of the past, can still shake the present with a single sentence. Elsewhere, a completely different, yet equally complex, relationship is forming. Leslie and Vanessa didn't come together by a clear choice, but by an inexplicable resonance. Two individuals on the fringes of society, each carrying their own story, yet finding in each other a familiar reflection. Vanessa wasn't always like this. She once had a place, a network of relationships, a sense of belonging. But since becoming involved with Joey, everything has begun to change. The isolation didn't come suddenly, but unfolded slowly, step by step. Their encounters became less frequent, their conversations awkward, and eventually, a distance grew between them that she no longer knew how to bridge. The scariest thing was that Vanessa wasn't entirely sure she wanted to go back. Her shift in thinking wasn't just a result of Joey's influence, but also an internal reaction. A part of her accepted being on the outside, accepted no longer conforming to old norms. But acceptance didn't mean peace. It was just another way to exist. Leslie, ostracized by the town, became a strange anchor. Not because she offered security, but because she didn't demand Vanessa become a different version of herself. In Leslie's eyes, Vanessa didn't need to explain, didn't need to justify. And that made Vanessa feel more comfortable than any normal relationship before. But this harmony also carried a risk. When do people stand on the margins? They can strengthen each other, but they can also pull each other further away from the center. Vanessa begins to see the world through a different lens, where old norms lose their meaning, and choices once considered wrong become justifiable. It's not liberation, but a form of cognitive restructuring where she convinces herself that the path she's on is right, simply because there's no more accessible alternative. The question is no longer whether Leslie and Vanessa will become close friends. It's where this relationship will lead them. Will they find a new way of existing, or are they merely reinforcing each other's isolation? And more importantly, is Vanessa truly choosing her own path? Or is she simply drifting along a trajectory she no longer has the power to change? All of this, though unfolding on different paths, converges on one common point. No one truly controls their own story as much as they believe. Donnie seeks reassurance but faces insecurity. Andre tries to assert his position, but in doing so undermines the very foundations of their relationship. Bill maintains his power through indifference, but this only makes things more unpredictable. And Vanessa, in her search for self, may be losing herself in the most subtle way. When boundaries are set and then broken, when feelings are denied but never disappear, everything is just waiting for a moment big enough to explode. And when that happens, no one can pretend it was all insignificant anymore. There's no clear end to these kinds of conflicts because their essence lies not in the events themselves, but in what's repressed behind them. The more Johnny tries to keep things insignificant, the more internal pressure builds. She's not unaware of the change in Andre's behavior, nor does she misunderstand the true meaning behind Bill's attitude. But what angers her isn't their actions, but the fact that she's forced to react. In this delicate balance, Donnie is accustomed to being in control of her own narrative. She decides what matters, what can be ignored, who is allowed to enter her personal space. But when Andre unilaterally sets boundaries with Bill, he inadvertently takes away that control. And when Bill brazenly disregards those boundaries, he's not just disrespecting Andre, he's challenging Donnie herself. Two seemingly contradictory actions coincidentally converged on a single point. They both acted without her consent. The feeling was hard to name, but it was clear. It wasn't jealousy, nor was it hurt. It was a loss of control. And for Donnie, that was unacceptable. She began to reanalyze everything, not to find answers, but to find her place. If Andre was trying to prove he was her current man, why did she feel like she was being molded into a mold? If Bill truly belonged to the past, why could he still provoke reactions he couldn't deny? These questions had no simple answers, and that very complexity only intensified Donnie's frustration. Andre, on the other side, wasn't as steadfast as he appeared. His confidence in confronting Bill was only superficial. Beneath the surface lay a sense of threat he refused to acknowledge. He knew he was being compared, not directly, but through lingering traces of the past. Every time Bill appeared, every time that name was mentioned, Andre had to remind himself that he was in the present. But the need to remind himself was a sign of unease. When he set boundaries with Bill, it wasn't just about protecting Donnie. It was an attempt to assert his right to exist in that space without being encroached upon. But what he hadn't anticipated was Donnie's reaction. Instead of feeling protected, she saw it as an imposition. And that made all his efforts counterproductive. Andre's anger didn't erupt, but it spread. It transformed into rigidity, into increasingly extreme decisions. If soft boundaries didn't work, he would create harder ones. If words weren't respected, he would force attention through actions. But each such step pushed him further away from what he truly wanted: a stable relationship where he didn't need to constantly prove his worth. Bill, meanwhile, seemed unchanged, but that very unchangingness was his most effective strategy. He didn't need to compete, he didn't need to explain. His presence itself was an affirmation. His calling Donnie by her old terms wasn't unconscious. It was a way of maintaining a connection, a thin thread, yet strong enough not to be completely severed. What made Bill dangerous wasn't what he did, but what he didn't do. He didn't react to Andre's provocation in the way one would expect. He didn't try to directly disrupt Donnie's current relationship. Instead, he lets things unfold naturally, believing that what once existed will find its way back in different forms. It's a subtle form of control, where he doesn't need to hold on, but still doesn't let go. In this context, Donnie becomes the crossroads of all the pressure. She not only has to confront two men, but also herself. What she once believed about herself, that she had moved on from the past, that she wasn't bound by old emotions, began to waver. And when self-belief is questioned, every decision becomes more difficult. On another front, Vanessa is also experiencing a similar crisis, though its manifestation is completely different. She's not pulled between two men, but between two versions of herself. On one side is the person she once was, with her relationships, norms, and expectations. On one side is the person she's becoming under Joey's influence and the choices she can't reverse. Vanessa's shift in perception isn't obvious. It creeps in through small thoughts, seemingly insignificant decisions. She begins to question things she'd previously taken for granted. She looks back at old relationships and finds them strange. But instead of feeling a sense of loss, she feels a strange sense of relief. Leslie appeared at that opportune moment, confirming that Vanessa wasn't the only one straying from the common path. In Leslie, Vanessa saw not only empathy, but also the possibility of existing without having to return to what had been lost. But that very possibility was tempting. It allowed Vanessa to rationalize everything, turning difficult choices into inevitable steps. Their closeness wasn't loud, but it was deep. It didn't need external validation, and therefore it was even harder to break. But precisely because of that, it could become a closed loop. When two people constantly mirror each other, they can lose the ability to see reality objectively. All doubts are soothed, all warnings are ignored. Vanessa began to realize that she was no longer standing between two worlds. She had completely stepped to one side, though she never officially admitted it. And when she realized it, her first feeling wasn't fear, but anger. Not anger at others, but at herself for letting things spiral out of control without a clear stopping point. All these stories, though different on the surface, revolve around a common axis: control. Who is controlling whom, who is losing control, and who is pretending to still be in control? When those questions no longer have clear answers, things begin to spiral into instability. And in that state, even a small trigger can create a chain reaction. A hasty decision, an ill-considered word, an action that crosses the line, all can become a trigger point. When pressure has built up long enough, an explosion is no longer a possibility, but an inevitability. If you have better ideas or more interesting theories, share them in the comments so everyone can discuss them together. I truly appreciate every contribution and all of your support. Thank you so much. And if you have not followed us yet, scroll down and hit the subscribe button.